Okay. Good day, everybody. Um, it has been a long time since I have done a live on YouTube, and it's probably gonna be one of the best things I'm gonna do right now. Is I hold on, let me check everything. I want to get a link of this to everybody. Okay, details, blah 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 blah. Okay, so I I don't know how to word this, but I I was a before I started out where I am today. I used to work for school newspapers, and school newspapers were the best things I've ever done. And it's weird that um you're not seeing any of my beard anymore. It, I shaved it off. Um I decided to shave off my beard, and it was one of the greatest moments where I grew up my beard for River's End, and it was probably my first time acting. But I forgot to mention that I've interviewed people in the past, and interviewing is one of those things where you could do it either go once or go twice with an interview. And when I did interviews, I did them on the spot. I barely had any time to prepare for some of them. And then there were some interviews where I was like, what am I doing? In the back of my mind, I remember my very first interview I ever done. And I won't mention it until I get to it. And it was probably the best interview out of most of the interviews I've done. But I've interviewed actors, mostly actors and voice actors, one music person, but mostly actors and voice actors. And I just felt like, you know, I got to picture who I am because of these interviews. And I never thought that I would learn things about certain people that I would never know. So what I'm going to do is I am going to show you guys or tell tell you guys. Well, I'm going to show you guys um, each interview I've done and how I was able to do it. So, hang on, let me get the link up. Let me see how I'm doing. Sorry, I'm just making sure that everything's working well, that everybody can hear me, because there's points in my videos where you can't hear me at all. So I'm testing everything out right now. It's still up in the air. I should have done it through my phone. That's the first thing. I definitely should have done this through my phone because it's easier to connect with your phone. I almost dropped my phone. And let's see. Let me see if my audio's. Let's see. All right, audio's coming through nice and clear. So just happy that the audio is working. Let me get the link. How do I get the link? Because I want to share this to people. I need to exit the live chat because I can see the live chat right here. Um, Here we go. Share. I just like telling people like, hey, this is what I did for a living. I mean, I got to interview some pretty cool people in my life as working for a newspaper. So I'll give you a little background about that. So 2016, I went to a community college, and this community college, I was shy at first, and then my buddy Josh was like, "Hey, the newspaper needs writers. Do you think you can do a review or something?" And I'm like, "Yeah, you know what? I'll do it." So I did not an interview. I did a review with my friend Reggie, who is known as the next on here. And when I did this review, I was like, "Hey, writing is my calling card, and writing is where I belong." So I did all of that, and it was a lot of fun. We did a review on Resident Evil 5 called Expect the Unexpected. That was the name of the title, and I remember it clear as day. It was the first interview. Oh my god. It was the first time I actually did a review. And then 2016 still goes around. I'm doing review after review after review after review. And I'm just like, when it comes around to 2017, I'm just like, I did these reviews. I want to go a step further. So I decided to do a article on a Comic Con that's near me. So I did that, and I was able to land an interview with somebody. And then I was just like, you know what? Interviewing is a lot of fun. It's something that I love doing. I love doing interviews. Doesn't matter who or what it is, interviewing is a lot of fun, and I get to express my thoughts and feelings on specific things or what they've done. So I'm going to go in order about these interviews I've done and probably tell you guys, like, hey, this person is awesome to talk to. So um, I'm going to go from but not how I rank them. It's just like whatever's on over here. I'll definitely talk about it a lot, and it's gonna be like I'm not favoritism about my interviews. I don't favor them. I don't favor it anymore because these interviews are done on the spot sometimes, or I prepared my questions in advance, and I was like, okay, you know what? I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do this interview, and hopefully I don't cry that I'm interviewing these people. So to start it off, we're gonna go to one of the best best interviews or articles I've ever done, and these are from the school newspapers I worked for. So this one right here is one of my favorites. This is the best, one of the most fun interviews I've ever done. So, um, this is my interview with Nick Apostolidis. And when I did this interview, I was running the newspaper at the time, and I I was like, Resident Evil 2 just came out, and I'm like, you know what? I want to interview somebody from this game, and I decided to pick Nick because Leon Kennedy is the most popular character in Resident Evil. So I'm like, Leon and Claire are popular. Um, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna interview Nick. Nick is top priority for this article. So I got to interview him, and honestly, it was a lot of fun. I got to know him. It me and him we talked for the interview lasted for about 33 minutes, and he brought to light on how things are done. It was interesting. I loved every second of it, and I was just like, oh, so this happened in the game, and how did you react to it? He gave me the honest answers, and you know, coming from somebody who loves Resident Evil, as I'm wearing my Stars shirt, um, it it really means a lot when you find somebody who's dedicated as Nick to play a character that's so iconic. And interviewing him was probably fun. Probably I did it. Interviewing him was the best time I've had because we're both Resident Evil fans and we both fangirl about it. He also taught me the difference between cutscenes and like gameplay, not cut mocap to the game itself. It's hard to explain. He did a much better job than I am at this. So it it was a lot of fun. I mean, interviewing him, uh, it was a lot of fun. So our next one, since we're going to be on the verge of Resident Evil, this, as you can tell from this particular photo, this is when I interviewed Matthew Mercer. I remember this interview the most because not only did he play Leon, he played characters that I knew, like Levi from Attack on Titan, some guy from Sword Art Online, but I've known him as Leon. So I was like, you know what? I saw him at the con at C2E2. That's the con that I go to. I saw him at C2E2, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna interview Matthew Mercer, and hopefully I don't fangirl over him. So when it was a short interview, it was like 5 minutes. I didn't record him. I decided to just do an impromptu interview, and it was probably an interesting one because I learned a lot, and it was a lot of fun. I mean, I got to know him. I I was like, you know what? I want him to have my articles. I want him to look at these and actually read them. Because I did a article on Resident Evil Vendetta and the C2E2. And I was like, from my heart, I want him to have these articles. So I called his agent. I didn't call his agent. I emailed his agent. And it was like an email where I'm like, this is what it is meant to be for when somebody wants your articles. And I got a phone call from him saying, hey, I want these. Please, can you send them to me? So he was the very first voice actor to receive my articles that I've done. And then when I interviewing him was great. And a lot of people have seen the video of me and him together on YouTube. So I was just like, you know what? Let's get into this. Let's do this interview. And it was probably the best, not the best, one of the perfect interviews where I got to know his favorite roles. I got to know how long he's been voice acting. Same thing for Nick. I got to know how long he voice acted for. I'm just going to let you all know all of these are voice actors. I've interviewed one actor, and that was Thomas Ian Nicholas from American Pie. But that was for a movie he did called Living Among Us. Interviewing him was fun. But, what was I going on? Oh, Matthew Mercer. Chill dude. Probably when he wanted those articles, I was just like, whoa. And my advisor, who I remember this clear as day, he was like, hey, Leon or RJ, can you got a phone call? I'm like, I do. He's like, yeah, go, I'll put it to your phone. So it was Matt who called, and he was like, yeah, I want your articles. Can you send them to me, please? And yeah, he was the first ever voice actor that has gotten my article. And Nick has a copy of this too. I have a copy, Nick has a copy, and then the school newspaper has a copy of this. And then the same thing goes for this one. This one went to Matt, and it was a lot of fun. So these two are very special. The next ones are very, very, very special to me in every way possible. And I'll show you guys them because, I never get to showcase my articles or anything I've done for success. And the one I'm going to show you was the very, very first interview I have ever conducted for a school newspaper. So when I was 20, yes, I was 20, I worked for the school newspaper at the community college I went to. And I was like, I'm going to do an article on C2E2. That was the very first C2E2 article I've ever done. So originally, I was going to meet Jeffrey Dean Morgan, who played Negan on The Walking Dead, and John Winchester was in Supernatural. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to meet Jeffrey Dean Morgan. I want to interview him. But the thing is that he canceled. And I went, fuck. What do I do now? What the fuck do I do now? So I'm like, you know what? I am going to interview somebody that nobody would expect. And I did the article without anybody knowing. And it was probably the best article I've ever written in my life. Well, this one and the next one. So I'm like, I'm looking through the list. I'm like, who is a good person to interview? Because I just started out writing and I wanted to get out of reviews, so I did the C2E2 article. So I'm like, what better way to do something with a bang is to interview one of the most popular voice actors in the US. Well, I interviewed the top 3, in my opinion. So the very first interview I have ever done, ironically, was one of my favorites coming up pretty soon. And that was Mr. Troy Baker. I remember this interview like it was nothing. I cosplayed as Joel. As you can see from the photo, I was cosplaying as Joel. And my aunt took that photo. And I was like, what is it like to be a voice actor? How long have you been doing? I asked him, like, what was your favorite role? And he told me he doesn't know because he has so many of them. And when the editor-in-chief saw this article, he's like, wait a minute. Wait a goddamn minute. He pulled me aside. He was like, hey, RJ? I'm like, yeah. He's like, dude, I'm putting your article with Troy Baker on the front page of features and entertainment. In the back of my mind, I'm like, what? Are you serious? He's like, and then he went, yeah. But back to the whole interview. Troy and we got to know each other just in a couple of minutes. I learned that he did music. I didn't know he did music. And the funny thing is, um, I think in this article I mentioned Joel. Yeah. And the funny thing was that year I never played The Last of Us. I got a PlayStation 4 the year before. I had The Last of Us and I never played it. I was a fan of him from Resident Evil 6 when he played Jake. I think I mentioned that in the article too. Let me look. Yeah, like I interviewed him about his different roles, and I was happy um that I was able to get to know him, and it was probably the fun interview I've done, and it was great to see how everything turned out, and I was just like, holy shit, this is amazing. So there's one thing I need to do. I'm gonna set my thumbnail to something. I need to see how to do that. Let me see. How do we do this? Edit. So I'm still learning the ropes of everything. Customization. Let's see. Is it under details? I don't know. I honestly don't know. Is there anything for thumbnail? I guess it's only at the beginning. Um, so I'll probably make the next one the thumbnail because it was probably the crowning moment of interviews for me because I'm known for interviewing voice actors, and voice actors are my favorite thing to interview because I play video games all the time, as you could tell. I go to Comic Con all the time, as you could tell. I've done walkthroughs, I've done reviews, but you know, this interview that I'm going to show you guys is one of my personal favorites. I know I wasn't going to play favorites, like I said before, but this one takes the icing on the cake for interviews. And it was probably the best interview I've ever done. And I wish I recorded it because it was a lot of fun. So, when I went to a university, I started working for a newspaper there at, at the university. So I'm like, um, let's do. I was watching a YouTube series um, called Retro Replay. Now they're known as Couch Soup, but this it was just when Retro Replay was first starting out, and me and my editor in chief, I was the associate editor. We were talking about like front page stuff, and I was watching Replay, and I'm like, and she comes over to me. She's like, "Hey, RJ." I'm like, "Yeah." She goes, "If you want to do a review, you can do a review of that." And I'm like, "What?" She goes, "You're gonna do a review on Retro Replay." I'm like, "Really?" She's like, "Yeah." So the whole thing started out as a review. So here's the article itself. It's called Retro Replay Blast from the Past. Probably the fun interview that I've done. And honestly, it was probably the crowning moment of my interviews because not only did I get to revisit with Troy Baker, I got to bond with him and Nolan North. And honestly, that was a fun interview. That interview was my longest. That one lasted about an hour and a half because I had time to prep. I had time to do this. But when we were talking, it was like, I'm talking to these guys who have this big reputation of these roles that they have done. And in the middle of the interview, I'm psyching myself out, and it was a lot of fun just talking with them about Retro Replay. And then the whole thing that was going on was Retro Replay was it shot up to fame, and I didn't anticipate that. But I was like, interviewing them, it was a lot of fun. And when I told Troy, I'm like, yeah, I interviewed you before. He's like, when? I'm like, it's C2E2 2017. And immediately he remembered who I was. His exact words were, wait a minute, RJ, fuck yeah, I remember you. I'm like, and it was great that he remembered who I was. And that was the year that we found out that Death Stranding was going to feature Troy Baker. So in the middle of the interview, I'm like, hey, congratulations, Troy, on Death Stranding. And the funny part was when Nolan and I talked, it was the great moments that we've had. Like, let me see if I can read some of this stuff. So there were times where they were at conventions. These were in Nolan North's words were, we went to conventions, but we had separate things. So it was probably a great interview. And then the very first episode was Spider-Man on the Atari. And I remember that episode because Nolan brought up his time when he played it on Retro Replay. And my words were, let me see what I can find. He said, I'm like, dude, what was going through your mind when you were playing a Spider-Man? And he said, according to North, I never found the term rage quit until that game. The struggle was real. So I was just like, holy shit. And I mentioned in the article that Nolan North and Troy Baker are my favorite oh my god, favorite voice actors. And it was that article made the front page of this newspaper. And so I found out that Nolan North was coming to my con, the C2E2. And I'm like, fuck, I gotta meet him. I gotta see him. I gotta meet him. So I did a photo op with him. And I'm like, hey, can I go grab something? He's like, yeah, go ahead. I grabbed the newspaper. He's like, no, you're not him. I'm like, yeah, it's me. It's RJ. And I was wearing a wig. He does this. He's like, oh my God, it is you. And when I met him again at his autograph table, I'm sorry, I'm about to cry. He always gave advice to people on Retro Replay. And he gave me the best advice that I've ever gotten from my articles. They read the articles. I signed them to them. And Nolan was like, hey, don't give up your writing. You're very talented. Don't ever give it up. And immediately when I heard that, I'm like, I almost cried in front of him. But yeah, those articles are the best thing that ever happened to me. Besides my niece, besides everything that's happened to me. I'm just like, fuck, what do I do? But hearing those words from Nolan North, it really meant something to me. And just like that, I am here now because of those words. I never stopped writing. Now I help out on River's End all the time with script writing, just helping JCast out with everything. And, you know, interviewing is a part of me that I can never let go. And honestly, it really meant a lot when I did these interviews. And realizing who they are, what they've done, is the greatest thing that I remember. Doing these interviews was the best. And I got, with the Retro Replay interview, they're now, yeah, like I said, they're called Couch Soup now, but I'm always going to remember the Retro Replay article I did for them. And, you know, giving the articles to the ones that wanted them was like, holy shit, you know, these people are big people and they have your writing in their possession. And Troy, not only did I send him one of these, I sent him one of these too. Oh, wait, I sent him one of these. So every single article I just showed you guys is probably in the hands of them. And I'm so happy that that happened. But I actually have things to do tonight, but I thought I'd share some of the stuff that I did for school newspapers because that was my passion. I never showed it on here. I never showed what I did outside of YouTube or walkthroughs. So, in closing, I'm going to say, you know, thank you all for tuning in. And hopefully you guys watch this video. And the one thing that I'm going to give advice to, just like Nolan gave to me, is always think that you can do anything you want. And believe me, when you believe in yourself, you'll know what you're doing. All right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. Leon out.